All right, the last lesson for the week, last lesson for the chapter, 6.7, which is mostly on solving higher level equations with radicals. Again, be sure to pay attention to the details of the steps. What I love about the second semester of 136, in the first semester I teach to make sure we weed out the students who think they're 136 but don't really have the 136 moxie and need to prove themselves. The second semester I can teach to the students who really care, and like I said, even if the other students kind of get through, they still got to go back and retake the first semester, which is not easy to do. But anyway, focus on the details, because again, those details will help you out in future math classes and other things like that. What you'll learn is that math repeats itself a lot. A process that you hated in year one will pop up again in year three with a different type of problem that uses a similar process. So if you learn that process in year one, then when you see a different version in year three, you can say, hey, this is just like that other one, and you've already got the sequence down and you kind of have an idea. But like I said, just make sure you're trying to learn the details of what I'm doing. Generally, our first focus is to get the radical alone. So I'm giving you the solving strategy right now, and then we're going to use it. But again, and you can take notes from this, but our first focus is to get the radical alone. All right. After you get the radical alone, we take it to the appropriate power. What does that mean? It means if I have square root of x equals 5, you should understand you're supposed to square both sides to get rid of that square root. That if I have the third root of x equals 5, then I'm supposed to take it to the third power to get rid of the root. So again, depending on that number, remember there's an invisible 2 here, but depending on that number, that's what power you take it to. There are also problems that have a, I just lost my spot, that have a rational exponent. So again, when I get to that, make sure you work for understanding on how to cope with those situations as well. So let's just go ahead and again get to it, and remember that in this situation you could have extraneous solutions, and just kind of, you don't have to really do a formal check for me, but you should always do a quick mental check by just kind of imagining what's going to happen and making sure the numbers make sense. Either way, solve each problem, be sure to continue to consider extraneous solutions. This is root 4y plus 5 minus 1 equals 4. And again, you cannot touch the 4, you cannot touch the 5, but you don't want to get rid of this until everything else is gone. It was just like when we did absolute value. Remember I told you similar processes. When we did absolute values, all that stuff, you have to get the things by themselves first. Now you get square root of 4y plus 5 equals 5. Which means now we can't touch the 5 over the 4 till this is gone, so we square both sides. That makes 4y plus 5 equals 25. We then subtract 5 from both sides, getting 4y equals 20. We then divide both sides by 4, getting y equals 5. And yes, you are getting to the level where you do not need to show me plus 5 and all that. You really don't even have to show me the squared part, because as long as you know you're squaring it, you'll understand that this goes away, that this should be the square of whatever was there. But again, you're getting to higher level math. You are now officially talented in math. So you may take a couple skip steps with a lot of teachers because they really don't need all the extra plus 5 stuff. Now, adjust to your teacher. If you get a teacher who says you got to show the work, humble yourself, show the work, because they will mark you wrong. And hopefully you've learned from me, who's the easier version of all the teachers you're going to see, that we will mark you wrong for not doing what you're supposed to do. All right, so again, 3 square root of x minus 12 equals 21. I didn't check for extraneous solutions because I know there's no extraneous solution. I'll just tell you, extraneous solutions tend to pop up whenever there's an x on the inside and an x on the outside, or there's 2 different radicals with a number involved. But again, I know this from experience. There's no need to really check those. Nothing weird's going on yet. So 3 root x minus 12 equals 21. What I know is that this is the radical I have to get rid of. But again, this is like saying 3x minus 12, which means the first thing I want to do is add 12. And yes, I'll write it, but you know, like I said, you don't have to write that part. And that gives me, what, 33. And then I'll divide both sides by 3, getting 3, or root x, sorry, equals 11. And then I'll get rid of my square root by squaring both sides, getting x equals 121. And again, quick check, 11, because that'll be 11 times 3, which is 33. 33 minus 12 is 21. So again, typically whenever it's a basic, straightforward problem, it's not going to have any extraneous solutions. There's no real need to really check for extraneous. It's just whenever you get to the tricky ones that things get interesting. But again, those are your 2 easy, basic root problems. This is the one I was telling you about with the rational exponent, that you need to make sure you figure out how it works. But again, even that's not tough. Same thing goes though. I can't touch the 6 until the parentheses are gone. The parentheses don't go away until the 3/2 goes away. Well, the weakest thing here is the 2, which means I'm going to divide both sides by 2, because that leaves me the root like I need it to be. Now, how do you get a exponent to go away? You've got to remember that the exponent that's in front of or after every number is a 1. So how do we make this a 1? Well, what you do is you take it to its reciprocal power. Because if you remember, I'm sorry, it should be 2/3. If you remember, 3/2 times 2/3 is going to be 6/6, which is 1, which leaves us x minus 6. So again, when you want to get rid of a fractional power, not multiply, but take both sides to its reciprocal exponent. 8 to the 2/3 is actually going to break down, and it should. I don't think you can do this in this calculator. You can do it. Look at that, 4. And then, of course, the last thing we're going to do is add 6 to both sides to get 10. And again, 10 minus 6 is 4. 4 to the 3/2, just to make sure I show you this part here. 4 to the 3/2 is 8. 8 times 2 is 16, and that's what we're supposed to end up with. So there you go. Don't know if that showed up, but there it was. But again, the key thing is just practice, practice, practice. You are not taking this class now to get things right. You are taking them to master your skill for the hard stuff you're going to see a little bit next year, but mostly 2 years from now, whenever you really need to know what's going on. If you're answering this one, first off, I would not get, this is the too radical stuff. And you need to definitely make sure you take good notes on this, because I believe this one makes you show your work. And again, I'm sorry, but again, if you don't know what it's asking you to show, miss the problem before you do the work, see what it's going to ask you for, copy that down and use that as a guide, because that's really all math is just if you can learn to follow directions and get things right, then you're a mathematician. A lot of people are mathematicians. They just had people lie to them about how tough math is their whole life. But the first thing I would do is make sure the roots are on opposite sides, because it's hard to square a root. It's hard to square a binomial that has 2 roots. So this is already set up. So what I'm going to do is square both sides. That means this comes out as d minus 21. But if you remember my shortcut for doing the binomials, it's this times itself, this times that double, so that'll be negative 6 root d, so minus 12 root d. And then remember this times itself, which is plus d. Alright, so again, because a root times itself is just going to come out. So that would be your first step. Your second step would be to simplify, because there's so much stuff going on. But notice d over here and d over here are going to go away. So you actually end up with negative 21 equals 36 minus 12 root d. Now what we are going to do is get this by itself, because again, just like what we just learned, I cannot solve until the root is by itself, so I'm going to move the weaker. This is 12 times d, this is 36, I'm going to subtract 36 and get negative, 57 equals negative 12 root d. Then I'm going to divide by negative 12, again it's just going to go to the bottom. 57 over 12 I think reduces. 19/4, so this will be 19 over 4 equals square root of d. And now that the root is by itself, we square both sides. Again, whenever you square root a fraction, square root both parts. That is, I remember 19 squared is 9 squared with its ending. So 9 squared is, no it's not, 9 times 4, so 36 ends in a 1 over 16. I just had a weird way of remembering, I'm sorry. But I had to memorize all my squares up to 25, and that was what helped me. But either way, I believe that's 1, 2. You don't need to show me that step. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And again, not showing me the squares, but those I believe are the 5 boxes that you're going to do. So again, just make sure you study that. Make sure you understand each step. It's not about getting the answer right. It's about understanding why I did that. It's about understanding where this came from. It's about understanding that before we can do anything, we have to move the 36 and the 12 before we can square. When you understand the how, math gets easy. When you're just kind of, going through and just saying, I'm going to get this done because I don't want to do homework, it's not going to come to you so fast. I think that was my hardest thing when I was in school, was just that I was so busy trying to get the answer. I wasn't trying to learn why the answers were the way they were. And then math switched, which it's going to again in about a year or so. And you either make the switch to trying to actually learn the process and not care about the answer, or you kind of sink and you won't be in 6th weight anymore, for math at least. All right, so with what we just did, we moved the root away. I need you to actually work on doing this too, because there are some times when, you know, I hope I get this right, but what we are going to do, as it says, is assume we are going to square both sides first, because what you would typically do is move the 8 and then have a regular number and not have to deal with all the junk. But I am going to square first, and I want to do this because you have to show your work on this, and I need you to show me you can do this. So when I square this, because it's complex and I need you to know complex stuff for yourself, 8 times 8, 64. 8 times that, or this times that, would be 8 root x minus 8 doubled, because remember, you take those two things and double them, so it'll be plus 16 root x minus 8. And then that times itself would just be plus x minus 8 equals 100. Again, make sure you know where that's coming from. When I square something, I take this times itself, this and this doubled, and then this times itself, and there's your 100. Again, simplify first, which means 8 and 64 can both be put together. That, I believe, is 56 plus 16 root x minus 8 plus x. Now, we got to get this by itself. I'm sorry, equals 100. You got to get this by itself now. So I'm going to move both of these things at the same time. I'm going to move the 56 and the x, because based off of my experience, moving 56 over here is just subtracting 56. Moving my x is just going to make it negative. So 16 root x minus 8 equals 44 minus x. Again, the 44 came from 100 minus 56, because I moved that over, and my x is over here. I am not going to divide by 16. And let me explain again so you understand the whys. Remember I told you moving a couple of steps ahead? Yes, I want to get this by itself. My general rule is to get this by itself and then go. But if I divide by 16, and 16 does, first off, 16 doesn't divide into 44, so that'll make a fraction. Remember I told you a couple steps ahead. That will make it a fraction here, as well as x over 16 here, which I would then have to square root, and I would really like to avoid square rooting fractions and having to deal with fractions. So what I'm going to do is break my own rule, because the better you get, the more you can do that. And I'm going to square both sides now and cross my fingers. And what you get when you square this is this times itself, which is 256, and this times itself, which is x minus 8, equals 44 times itself, which I should know, but I don't, sorry. 1936. That times itself, or that times that doubled, so minus 88x plus x squared. Again, make sure you're following. This came from, if I square it, I square the 16, I square the root, so 256 times x plus x minus 8. This comes from this times itself, multiply and double, and then this times itself. Now what I need to do is set this up, because remember, if there's an x squared, everything wants to roll over there. And so in order to roll everything over there, the first thing I need to do is distribute my 256. So it becomes 256x minus 2048 equals all this stuff over here. And then from there, remember, everything's going to roll over, but I am going to do all this in quote unquote secret, because I'm not going to write what I did, because again, as you get higher in math, you understand the stuff, and here's what I'm going to do to help you get used to it. It's got to be quadratic. We know we're going to probably have to use the quadratic formula. The quadratic formula tends to start with x squared in front, so I am going to move x squared to the front. Typically the x is second, so I'm going to move this over here, but mentally I know, because I can do two steps at once, that I'm going to subtract 256 to move it with this x. So negative 88 minus 256 is negative 344. And the last thing I'm going to do is move this with the 1936, but to move this, I have to add it. So 1936 plus 2048 equals 3984. Now, you don't have to do any more than that. The initial instructions say, assume we're solving the problem by squaring both sides first. Set up the quadratic equation that results before finding the answer. I don't need you to go through the quadratic formula. All right. Looking at the test that we had, a lot of you probably couldn't do the quadratic formula with this anyway, which would just be setting you up for failure. But the important part of this, number one, is you have to know how to do this. There's no way you get this right without knowing it. I will tell you that this is on the test because you actually have to know these steps. But again, it's a process. Square first, simplify, get the root by itself, so move the 56 and the x, square both sides because we did not want fractions. That becomes 16 of that, and the next thing we had to do is distribute because that was the only option we really had. Last thing is to move everything together, and again, that is your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 boxes worth of questions or steps that you're going to have to do. But again, the main thing you need to shift in your brain if you want to succeed in this semester, at least succeed effectively, is that the answer is not as important as the process anymore. You don't worry about the answer anymore. You worry about the process now. And once you get to that point, math becomes more doable because it doesn't really matter what the answer is. You know that if you follow the process, you'll find it. You know, kind of like cooking. You may not know exactly what it's going to look like when you start, but you know that if you follow the directions of the recipe, that it's going to work like it's supposed to. So this represents everything you need to know for the test this week. Again, be sure to study all old sections as this is a big chapter. The toughest portion is that you do not know what you do not know. What that means is that you could easily miss half of the problems by making one slight mistake over and over and over. So if there was 4 boxes on each one and you always mess up because you don't you really think that what you're doing is right, you can easily make one small mistake 5 times on the test and miss 5 straight questions even though you're supposed to get them right. So again, just make sure you practice the skills. You should have a few days to do this because again, if you're working on the tempo that I'm giving you, you should be done with this particular lesson by Tuesday or so, at least Tuesday or Wednesday, which then at least gives you a couple days to, you know, go back and practice. But again, your pre-test goes up tomorrow, which is on Tuesday, and we'll close on Friday. 90% on all homework necessary, but again, let me know if you need assistance, and good luck. So again, let me verify. That pre-test is up on Tuesday, because I'm pretty sure some people will be watching this on Tuesday, or some of you are even going to be watching it on Thursday, but good luck with that. Talk to you all later.